Let's move on to Nigeria now. The country's Supreme Court has stopped the government from enforcing a Friday deadline for citizens to swap old banknotes for new ones. This comes as the International Monetary Fund flagged disruptions to trade and payments. The IMF, in fact, had asked Nigeria to consider extending the deadline to swap the old banknotes. Nigerians had until Friday the 10th to turn in 1,500 and 200 naira notes, after which the notes would no longer be legal tender. The central bank has started releasing these newly redesigned notes into the market, but many say they're simply not yet available. And that has triggered acute cash shortages and very chaotic scenes at banks. The CBN has said that recalling the banknotes is part of plans to reduce the use of cash and also part of efforts to curb double-digit inflation. Roughly $2.8 billion in old notes have been deposited into the banking system since the announcement of the changeover was made in late October. Let's bring in Deji Bademosi, joins us now from the country's commercial capital of Lagos. Deji, on this end of the world, we're seeing, chaotic scenes this year, incredibly long queues, fights even at ATMs and bank halls. Might today's injunction from the Supreme Court help at least to solve some of those problems?
Absolutely, Rama. It should. Because this is a decision from the nation's apex court. So the federal government and, of course, the Central Bank of Nigeria would be bound by the decision and verdict of this court. So we should begin to see some kind of normalcy return in the coming days. Of course, we don't expect that this is going to happen just immediately, but since this allows for the use of the old Naira notes as well, it means the old notes would still be legal tender now in the country. We should see some easing now in the situation, but it's really unfortunate that this whole thing should not have happened in the first place, and that's what a lot of people would tell you if it had been carefully managed. Obviously, this wasn't carefully managed, and somehow the Supreme Court now had to step in, and it's quite instructive that the Supreme Court justices made it very clear that they were intervening because this was a matter of urgency, and that something needed to be done to arrest the situation on the street, that things are difficult for people. People are going through a lot. So, and that's the reason why this motion ex parte was granted. And so we should begin to see some semblance of normalcy return in the next few days. Rama?
So did the central bank have any legal representation in courts today? And if so, what argument do they present to the justices?
Of course, the central bank had legal representation in court. Even the federal government, too, was represented in court. But, this was, the matter was heard ex parte. It was a motion ex parte. So the justices did not hear from the side of the central bank and, of course, the federal government. So they had this motion ex parte. And, what I understand by motion ex parte is that when the court decides to hear a case without really taking or listening to the other party. So, and the court decided to do so because it felt this was a matter of urgent national importance, and so it had to take that action. So the court did not hear from lawyers to the federal government and the CBN. The court will begin to hear the case because the main hearing has actually not started. That will actually start on the 15th of this month. That will be next week. So it's next week that the court will now begin to hear the main case itself. That's when, of course, both sides now, all the sides involved now would have to make their case before the justices. So I think that's when the lawyers now to the CBN and the federal government would have the opportunity to address the court, so to speak.
Indeed. Well, hopefully you'll finally get some answers about the question we had when we last spoke about this on how many notes were actually printed and were they sufficient. But let me get back to something else that I've seen in coverage of this story. Roughly a week ago, the CBN put out this statement where they described the selling of redesigned banknotes taking place in the country. So two parts to this question. A, what's the rationale for this and how is this even happening?
Well, first off, I think this is an opportunity that the CBN created itself. Let's just tell ourselves the truth. You raised a very valid point there when you said, look, it's necessary to know how much, for instance, the central bank keeps telling everyone how much it has mopped up as a result of this process, that it's been able to mop up somewhere in the region of 2 trillion naira. But it's silent on how much of the new note it has printed and how much it has distributed. The truth is that the banks have also made it very clear that, look, they do not have the notes they do not have the notes now in sufficient quantity. And you know, when you do not print enough, you've taken so much and you've not printed enough, you create, well, for want of a better word now, arbitrage. And that's exactly what is happening. So you have a situation where people are taking the opportunity to sell the cash. I'll give you a typical example, Rama. For instance, you go to a petrol station, you want to buy petrol. You want to buy petrol, the petrol attendant will tell you their POS machine is not working. So because they don't want you to use your card, they say they need cash. So you go everywhere to source for the cash. You pay that cash now for the petrol. You know what the petrol attendant does? They go to sell that money. They sell the currency. That's the new notes now. They sell to the POS operator. That POS operator also sells, because what POS operators are doing now is that they say, look, they got the cash at a premium. That's the new notes now. They got the cash at a premium. And so you go to pay, you go to withdraw from a POS operator. What should normally be a charge of somewhere around 100 naira. Now you want to take 10,000 naira. You have situations where POS operators are taking 4,000 naira from you, Rama. So we have a situation in this country today, Rama, where we are selling, or we're actually buying the naira, so to speak. So Nigerians are buying the naira. They're using naira to buy the naira. So people are taking advantage of that arbitrage that has been created. And that's how people are selling the currency. And, you know, you must have seen stories about hoarding by some banks, of course, even though that is not widespread. But the truth is that this is an opportunity that was created by the central bank in the first place. And people are profiteering from this, unfortunately, Rama.
I want to pick up on something that you said there. We've also seen those reports on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, reports of bank managers, bank officials being arrested and being accused, in fact, of hoarding these new notes. Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, we've had situations where some bank officials now were caught or are arrested for hoarding the new notes, and that's quite true. There's no doubt about that. But it's not widespread. I mean, it's not as if it's the in thing across all the banks. That's certainly not the case. The case is that not enough money has been printed, and that's what everyone has been asking the central bank. The central bank keeps insisting that the banks, the deposit money banks, have enough in their vault, enough of the new notes to give to customers. But the representatives of these deposit money banks have also come out to say, look, that is actually not the case. In fact, some banks have been forced to shut down their operations. Some of them have been forced to just stop work altogether, just because you know, people get this information from the central bank that these banks have the money, and then you have situations where some banks are coming under attack. We've had several banks that have been attacked just because people get to their ATM machines. The ATM machines are not dispensing cash. But the truth is, look, Rama, this is a situation, the situation is that not enough currency was printed. So why, for instance, would the central bank say ATMs should not dispense more than 5,000 naira cash? So what will people do with that? And then at some point, the central bank said banks should not pay these new notes over the counter. That, of course, created chaos, because people had only one way of getting the new notes, and that's by going to the ATM. So when the central bank realized that wasn't a fantastic decision, it changed it. That was last week. But then the truth is that most of these banks are saying they do not have the cash. They don't have it in sufficient quantity. And that's the reason why you are seeing what is happening at the moment. So now that the Apex Court has given this order, right, let's just hope that things should return to normalcy, I should say. Things should return to normalcy, because it means the old notes will come back, and will come back in circulation, since they are still regarded as legal tender. So that's what the situation is. Unfortunately, people are suffering, Rama. People have suffered a lot, but it's a good thing that the central bank has intervened. We just wait and see what happens. the hope is that things would normalize in the coming days, and probably
Gotcha.
by next week, people would probably forget about this.